manipulate the Infinity Gauntlet in such a way to where he could control it more or less. But that Nebula doesn't have this. Nebula does not have the intellect to withstand the overwhelming sensations that the Infinity Gauntlet brings to her. She doesn't have the mental fortitude to withstand the sudden rush of the recognition of all life in the universe, the sudden rush of the knowledge of knowing that everything is within her control. And so because of this, her mind, as fragile as it is, may very well crack, and when it does, she may subconsciously destroy the universe and everybody in it. And so what we see is that we transition back to Adam Warlock, and we see Adam Warlock more or less asking everybody if they agree to the plan that he's created. Now, at the moment, we don't know what this plan is, and we actually won't find out what it is until Infinity Gauntlet issue number 6. And when Adam Warlock and Thanos are alone, Thanos asks Adam Warlock what it is that he wants. And Adam Warlock says that they need Thanos' help, that it's not simply as though Thanos can or cannot choose, that the plan cannot go through if Thanos doesn't agree to assist them. And Thanos asks why. He says, what would happen if he chose not to intervene, if he chose not to fight on behalf of Adam Warlock and the other superheroes? And the question is, what does he benefit from, or what benefit does he gain if he chooses to fight on their behalf? Adam Warlock replies by saying that he'll give Thanos the truth. And Thanos asks what truth he's talking about. And Adam Warlock says it is the truth within Thanos. And this is a very intriguing conversation here, because what Adam Warlock tells us is that while he was within the Soul Gem, and while Thanos wielded the Soul Gem, or as long as it was in his possession, that Adam Warlock had a very unique viewpoint of Thanos' inner soul. He was able to, in fact, look within Thanos himself. And the one thing that he was able to understand here is that Thanos subconsciously realized that he was not worthy of wielding absolute power. And this is the reason why every attempt that Thanos had made to gain absolute power had always failed. Adam Warlock goes on to say that when Thanos first appeared in Marvel Comics and he was attempting to wield the Cosmic Cube, that subconsciously he allowed Captain Marvel to destroy the Cosmic Cube. That when he had gained the Infinity Gems for the first time and combined them into one massive gem, that again he subconsciously allowed himself to be defeated, and that allowing himself to become one with eternity, and despite the fact that he could have easily stopped it, allowing Nebula to gain the Infinity Gauntlet was yet again another example of him subconsciously recognizing that he's the means to his own defeat, that he recognizes subconsciously that he's not able to wield absolute power, or that he's not worthy of it. And so there's always this part of his mind that creates a set of circumstances whereby his defeat will be inevitable. Thanos begins to look into himself and realize that this is true, and so he agrees to Adam Warlock's plan. From here, we transition back to Nebula. And what we see is that Nebula is speaking with Eros, despite the fact that he still is unable to talk. And what Nebula says is that she's beginning to understand Thanos' hunger for power, the hunger for the infinite might of the Infinity Gauntlet. And the reason why is because her mind may not necessarily be as shattered as we were led to believe. Now, we don't really know if she's been able to overcome the sudden influx of all facets of reality. But what she tells Eros is that she recognizes that all of reality is hers to sculpt, that she can do anything she wants to with it, and that she will never again be subjected to a position where she will be made to, engage in activities that she would normally be against. Now, this isn't designed to indicate anything sexual in the sense that she was made to, engage in any kind of sexual activity. It's more of the fact that she would be subject to somebody else's whim. She would be made to kill other people, or she would be made to conquer other races. Instead, she could do whatever it is that she wants. And so what she says is that it's a very satisfying thing to us, or to her, that it's a very satisfying feeling to know that there's nothing that can overcome her. And what she does is she kind of gives a demonstration of the power she possesses by saying that she's aware that there is going to be a coming battle, that in exactly 5 seconds, the Earthbound superheroes will be arriving. And so what we see is that a portal opens up almost immediately immediately after this is said, and that the Earthbound superheroes, Fire-Lord, Thor, Doctor Doom, the Incredible Hulk, and Drax the Destroyer arrive and attempt to defeat Nebula. But again, she uses the power of the Infinity Gauntlet to demonstrate that there's nothing they can do to stop her. And what she does is she encases them in some sort of weird kind of rocky, force, or some kind of rocky form, to where all of them are locked in place and there's nowhere they can go. And so what she says is that she realizes that this is not simply just the arbitrary actions of a handful of superheroes doing what they can to defeat her, that this has all been orchestrated, and that most likely this has been orchestrated by Thanos. And so what we see is that Adam Warlock, the Silver Surfer, Thanos, and Doctor Strange appear, and that they're going to do what they can to defeat Nebula. And again, we'll see this plan come to fruition in issue number 6. So as we continue with Infinity Gauntlet issue number 6, what we're going to see here is this story beginning to come to a close. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that all the action and everything is going to wind down. In fact, we're going to be covering a lot of ground in a very short amount of time. And so like issue number 5, we're going to be splitting issue number 6 into 2 parts. But what we see as this story begins to unfold are a couple things. The first is that Nebula has imprisoned Thanos in a structure of rock that he can't escape from. But the other thing, and the more important thing here, is that Doctor Strange and the Silver Surfer are coming to realize something, that Adam Warlock exists outside the realms of chaos and order, and in fact may very well exist outside of this reality. And Thanos vocalizes this thought, or at the very least he interprets this thought for us, and tells us that Nebula is completely unaware of Adam Warlock's presence. She doesn't know that he's there. Now, the reason why, in terms of why Thanos knew that Adam Warlock was there, but why Nebula doesn't know Adam Warlock is here, is because Thanos more or less tells her this. Thanos tells Nebula that her intellectual capacity is not up to task for wielding the Infinity Gauntlet, that in fact she's not able to tap into its full power, and that if she was, she would have immediately known that Adam Warlock was there, even if on some kind of sensory level. Even if she couldn't physically see him, she would have been able to read his thoughts, or she would have known what he was thinking. Now the fact that Nebula can't see Adam Warlock is an extremely important thing, and this will become a major issue later on, although it won't necessarily be in the form that you think it is. But what we see is that Thanos again continues to taunt Nebula. He tells Nebula that she doesn't have the vision to properly exploit the Infinity Gems, and Nebula asks him whether or not he believes he does, and Thanos says yes. He says, look at what it was that he was able to accomplish so far using the Infinity Gems. Now this is really interesting when it comes to Nebula, because Nebula describes his actions as of killing off half the life in the universe in a very sarcastic way, indicating to us that this is something that she finds appalling. Now, whether or not this is because Nebula is trying to step into the role of a good guy here, or because Nebula is on the inside a good guy instead of a villain, is not something that's explained to us. But I would go as far as to say that Nebula, when you consider her previous actions in the Marvel Comics, especially when it came to eliminating the Nova Corps, is not necessarily a good person, but the idea of eliminating half the life in the universe is something that would be considered incomprehensible to all but the most extreme nihilists in the Marvel Comics, one of which is of course Thanos. And so what she says is that the reign of Thanos in the universe with regards to his possession of the Infinity Gauntlet is something that cannot be allowed to stand, and that she's going to use the Infinity Gauntlet to more or less set everything back to rights. But what we also see here is that Adam Warlock is signaling to Doctor Strange silently, and again, this is Adam Warlock taking precautions to ensure that Nebula doesn't know that he's there. And so Doctor Strange uses his magic to do something, although at the moment we don't know what that is. But what we see is that Nebula uses the Infinity Gauntlet to set everything back to the way it was before. Now, with the things that are coming up, with the things that are going to be taking place, I'm curious to see whether or not you would be able to predict them. Because what we're going to be seeing is that things are going to be changing in such a way that some very interesting circumstances are going to arise. But what we see is that as a result of Nebula setting everything back to the way it was before, that of course half the life in the universe is destroyed, is restored, but with everything being restored to 24 hours prior, Nebula, as Thanos explains it to us, reverts back into the previous form that she had when she was a husk of a being. And so Thanos, again, allows his arrogance to get the better of him as he begins to brag, as he begins to more or less taunt Nebula and say that when she has the power of godhood, she should be careful because whatever it is that she wishes for will come true. And so she has to exercise